The jungle pulsed with life. A symphony of chirping creatures, distant calls, and the rustle of unseen things filled the air. Filtered light streamed through dense foliage, dappling the ground with shifting patches of green and gold. Every leaf, every shadow, every sound held meaning to Ella. She knew which chirps signaled safety and which foretold danger. Ella crouched low behind the roots of a sprawling tree, her eyes scanning her surroundings. Her fur bristled with unease. She had ventured further from the safety of her burrow than usual, lured by the scent of ripe fruit. But something about the air felt wrong. The songs of the jungle's smaller creatures had stopped. No chittering birds. No croaking frogs. Nothing. Only silence. Her large eyes darted to the canopy above, her ears twitching to pick up even the faintest sound. Then she felt it. Not a sound but a presence. Faint tremors in the ground. Subtle at first. Rhythmic. Growing stronger. Her heart began to pound in sync with it. Thud. 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 Each step was heavier than anything she had felt before. Not a prowler. Not a stalker. This was something big. No. Not it. It can't be. Her mind flashed back to the old stories the elders told. The Carnívoro. The nightmare that walked upright. It didn't stalk like the jungle cats or slither like the vine serpents. It moved with purpose, heavy and loud, as if it had no need to hide. It hunted in the open because nothing hunted it. Her breath came shallow and fast. Stay still. Don't move. Don't breathe. It only sees you if you move. She pressed herself lower against the ground, heart thudding like a trapped insect in her chest. Her wide eyes watched the path ahead, waiting, dreading. The footsteps grew louder, closer. Leaves crunched, branches snapped. Then, from behind a cluster of ferns, it emerged. Stood on two legs. Its body was wrapped in strange, flat-colored skin. Not fur, not scales. Its head was small but its eyes were large, fixed forward like the apex predators of the jungle. Two forward-facing eyes, sharp and aware. Ella knew what that meant. Hunters had eyes like that. Predators. Killers. Her heart stopped. The Carnívoro. It was taller than the oldest trees she knew. Or so it seemed. It carried something on its back, strange objects hanging from its shoulders, and it gripped something long and metallic in one of its forelimbs. A weapon. Her breath hitched. The stories had spoken of claws and fangs, but this was something worse. It wielded something unnatural. She didn't blink. She didn't breathe. If I move, it will see me. If it sees me, I'm already dead. She watched it carefully, tracking every shift of its limbs, every tilt of its head. It scanned the area, its gaze passing right over her hiding spot. Her claws dug into the dirt. Don't move. Don't move. Don't move. The Carnívoro took slow, deliberate steps. It wasn't searching. It wasn't sniffing or stalking. It was looking. Its head swiveled side to side, its eyes scanning as if it were searching for something specific. Her breath came in shallow, measured gulps. What is it looking for? Prey. Food. Me. Then it stopped. Ella's body tensed so hard she thought she might shatter. Her eyes locked on its legs, watching for the first twitch of movement, the sign that it had seen her. But it didn't pounce. It didn't lunge. Instead, it crouched low, lowering itself into a squat. Her mind raced. Why is it crouching? Is it about to spring? But it didn't. Slowly, it reached for its back, gripping one of the strange objects attached to its body. Ella braced herself. A weapon. It had to be a weapon. It's going to throw it. It's going to strike. It's going to. The object clicked. A soft, metallic clatter echoed through the clearing as the Carnívoro placed something on the ground in front of it. Then it reached for something else. Smaller, smooth and flat. She watched, her eyes narrowing in confusion. This wasn't the behavior of a predator. Predators didn't leave things behind. Predators didn't crouch like prey. Her heart still raced, but her mind, sharp as ever, began to notice the difference. Why is it crouching? Why is it setting things down? The Carnívoro pulled something from its side. a small, cylindrical object. Her eyes followed every movement, calculating the threat. It tapped a part of the cylinder, and with a faint hum, a soft, glowing light flickered to life at its tip. Ella's eyes widened in shock. Like, it carries light in its claws. No beast in the jungle did this. No predator brought light where there was darkness. This wasn't a hunter's weapon. It wasn't a claw or a fang. It was something else. Her breath slowed as her panic gave way to confusion. The Carnívoro tapped its glowing object, and it made more sounds. Clicks, hums, and faint chirps echoed softly. It wasn't calling others of its kind. She'd heard predator calls before. No, this was a song. No, not a song. It was something sharper, shorter, like the sounds of the beetle clickers during the warm seasons. Precise. Deliberate. Her gaze narrowed. What is it doing? She didn't understand, but she watched intently, too curious now to look away. It tapped again, and the glowing light shifted color from white to blue. She blinked slowly, mesmerized. She had seen bioluminescent flowers deep in the jungle, but never light like this. Never something that changed its own color at will. Her fear dimmed, if only for a moment, replaced by a flicker of wonder. The Carnívoro remained crouched, staring at the glowing device. Its attention wasn't on her, and this fact gnawed at her mind. Predators didn't ignore prey. Predators didn't crouch like this. But she knew the stories. She knew what they said. The Carnívoro was the apex predator. Top of the chain. It didn't need to chase. It didn't need to hunt. It only needed to wait. Her claws dug into the dirt once more. This is the moment. This is when it strikes. Her body coiled like a spring, ready to leap away at the first sign of movement. But the moment didn't come. It didn't move. It didn't strike. It simply sat there, tapping its glowing device, its gaze fixed downward. Ella's eyes stayed on it for what felt like hours. This is wrong, she thought. This is all wrong. She glanced at the way it crouched, how it moved its claws with precision, how it made objects hum and glow. There was something off about it. It didn't fit into any of the elders' stories. Her gaze flickered to the glow once more, and something shifted inside her. Not fear. Not confusion. Curiosity. Her mind, sharp and quick, questioned the stories she had known since birth. If this is a predator, why does it not strike? Why does it play with light? She realized she didn't have an answer. The Carnívoro leaned back, stretching its limbs, its gaze finally rising. It didn't look at her, not directly, but it gazed toward her hiding place. Her breath caught in her chest. Seize me. Her heart raced, every muscle in her body ready to flee, but the Carnívoro didn't rise. It tilted its head slightly, as if considering something. Didn't bare fangs. It didn't roar. Just watch. Time stretched. Seconds felt like hours. She couldn't move. It didn't move. Her mind whispered the old stories again, but now something felt different. They were wrong. Her claws loosened their grip on the dirt. Her gaze stayed on the Carnívoro as her heart slowly, cautiously began to steady. Ella's thoughts churned as she stared at the human. Every muscle in her body remained taut, but her mind was no longer consumed by fear. The stories had painted the Carnívoro as a relentless hunter, a predator who would strike the moment it had an opportunity. But this one wasn't following the rules. It was something else. She couldn't tear her eyes away from it. Its hand, still open, palm facing her, hovered in the air as though it were waiting. Waiting for something. For me. The thought chilled her. But I haven't moved. I haven't attacked. Something deep within her whispered a quiet truth. It doesn't want to fight me. Ella's pulse thrummed in her ears, but her body relaxed just a fraction. It wasn't a predator's posture she was facing. It was something more uncertain. Something that didn't follow the expected patterns of the wild. In the jungle, every predator had a rhythm, a timing to their approach. But this was different. Her eyes flicked down to the human's fingers again. They were still, steady. Each movement it made seemed deliberate, measured. It wasn't reaching for a weapon. It wasn't preparing to strike. It was simply waiting. The air around them was thick with tension, but it wasn't the kind of tension she was used to. It wasn't the kind that signaled an ambush. It wasn't the tense stillness before a kill. This felt different, like the kind of stillness she'd feel when the jungle fell quiet during the dry season, when everything held its breath, not out of fear, but in patience. Ella couldn't help it. She tilted her head slightly, mirroring the human's gesture. It was a small movement, almost imperceptible, but it felt important. She wasn't sure why, but something about the human's presence made her want to understand. What is it? She thought again. Why isn't it hunting me? For a long moment, there was only silence between them. The only sound was the faint hum of the device the human held, shifting colors like a pulse. Ella's eyes followed the gentle flicker. The glow seemed to shift, not erratically like a predator's movements, but slowly, rhythmically, like the ebb and flow of a tide. It was like watching a heartbeat in the dark. Didn't make sense. If this was truly the apex predator the stories had warned her about, why was it behaving so differently? It should have sensed her fear, should have sensed her weakness and struck. But it didn't. Instead, it sat there, observing her with those strange, forward-facing eyes. She was used to creatures that hunted with silent precision. This was something else entirely. A low, vibrating hum echoed from the human again. It was a sound, but not one of aggression or dominance. It was softer, like a beckoning. A call not for a chase, but for understanding. Her breath caught in her throat as she realized the truth. The Carnívoro was not a hunter in the way she understood. It was something different, something that could be reasoned with. Ella's mind reeled. The stories didn't cover this part. They spoke of the human's teeth and claws, its predatory instincts, its strength. But they never spoke of it waiting, of it seeking something beyond blood. She couldn't remember any elder speaking of a carnivoro that would sit, unthreatened, in the presence of prey. She had never been taught what to do when faced with something that didn't behave according to the rules of nature. The jungle's predators, as terrifying as they were, followed predictable patterns. The carnivoro, however, was not following the pattern. She had to act. Her instincts demanded it. But she hesitated, caught between the urge to flee and the strange pull to stay. The hum from the human was growing louder now, and the light from its device shifted again, brightening, then dimming, as if responding to the rhythm of its strange sounds. Ella's muscles tightened again, but she didn't leap. Not yet. The human had not shown any aggression. In fact, it seemed to be inviting something, though she couldn't say what. Her gaze shifted from the glowing object back to the human. It had not moved. It had not lunged or growled. Its eyes were focused now, no longer scanning the surroundings, but fixed directly on her. The glow flickered once more, and in that brief moment of light, Ella saw something in the human's gaze that she hadn't seen before. An intensity. Not the hunger of a predator, but something else. Something urgent. It was then that Ella understood. The human was not just sitting and waiting. It was communicating. Not in the way her kind did with clicks or calls, but in its own language. She couldn't understand the words, but she could feel it in the air. The silence between them was full of unspoken messages. She stayed where she was, breathing slowly, trying to decipher the message. The human didn't appear threatening, but it didn't seem to be offering friendship either. It was as though it was waiting for her to respond. Her mind reeled back to the old stories once more. The elders had spoken of the carnivoro as an enemy, a creature to fear, a predator that killed for the sake of killing. But this didn't match. If it wanted to, it could have struck already. It could have attacked without hesitation, as the other predators did. But it had done nothing. Instead, it waited. Ella realized, with growing certainty, that she was no longer dealing with the kind of threat she had been taught to fear. This carnivoro, this human, was something beyond the jungle's rules. And that terrified her more than any fang or claw. Her eyes flicked back to the human's hand. Still open. Still waiting. The air was thick with tension. Should I run? Should I stay? But she didn't need to decide. The human's hand remained open, not in challenge, but in invitation. And for the first time, Ella's fear began to wane. She wasn't facing a monster. She wasn't facing a killer. She was facing a creature that didn't fit into the rules. The question remained, but now it was different. What do I do now?